Good afternoon. This is the May 7th, 2018 meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Madam Clerk, first item.
Roll call. Before I proceed with the roll call, Commissioner Hale will not be attending today's commission meeting. President Lau?
Present.
Commissioner Venetian?
Here.
Commissioner Camargo?
Here.
Commissioner Kadikian?
Here.
Item 2, consent items. Approval of the minutes for the February 5th, 2018 meeting.
Does anyone have any changes or edits to the minutes? Okay.
None.
Keeping in mind that it's two separate meetings that we're approving? Okay. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
2B, approval of the minutes for the April 2nd, 2018 meeting.
Ms. Lee, I believe both
Yeah, I think we
items,
just did
both
both.
minutes
Yeah,
were just
'cause we can
approved
do- we can
simultaneously.
do them
So we
simultaneously.
completed
Oh, did you have an edit though?
Yeah, there's an edit. I think Commissioner Chan is no longer. I think at the end of the minutes, it indicates absent Chan.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Minor. I motion for the second, for the April 2nd meeting to be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
3, GWP Commission staff comments.
Commissioners, any comments?
No.
Nope.
I have none.
4, reports. The proposed electric and water 5-year cost of service analysis, finance and rate plan.
Madam President, members of the Commission, we'll fire this up here. We have today before you a presentation of the proposed water and electric rate schedules for the next 5 years. These were put together as part of the process we go through to do a cost of service analysis, then develop a financial plan, and then from there a rate schedule that we will then take to City Council to propose for adoption. We'll go to, and there you go. That's what we have. So just a little bit of history, and I apologize for my voice, but I got something and I'm coming down with, so it's not the deep, slow, froggy voice on purpose. It's a bug.
Working for you, so just press on.
I should try to keep that one. Historically, just a little bit of background. Past practice in both, and this is primarily what has occurred in the more recent past over the last 10 years. Past practice led to sporadic rate development implementation. This created financial uncertainty. Capital improvement programs and operating cash reserve levels were negatively impacted, and the result was that significant rate increases were required to essentially play catch-up in these situations where we didn't keep pace on a regular basis. The last rate schedule we had was for electric, the 2014 to 2018 schedule, and that included increases of 8%, 7%, 5%, 2%, and 2% over that 5-year period, which was a 26% compounded rate increase. Some of you may be more than familiar with that, as you were here when we made that presentation to you. The existing water rate schedule, the 2015 to 2018 water rate schedule, and as you recall, we had some fits and starts with that because we had a previous water rate schedule that had been approved, and then due to some problems with how that was developed, and I'll leave it at that, we had to come back and make adjustments and actually put into effect a second water rate schedule, and that consisted of 4 years of 4% increases each year for a 17% compounded rate. In addition to that, we issued bonds of $60 million for electric and $35 million for water. Essentially, in those particular cases, those were necessary to undertake and maintain our capital improvement programs. The electric company was not doing well at the time. The water company was doing very poorly. The water company had a significant deficit, somewhere in the neighborhood of $22 million. So we were in pretty desperate financial shape at that particular time. So both of these bonds were issued to help kickstart our capital program and make sure that we kept up with the essential infrastructure. Ready. So with that said, our objective from that point on was to restructure our GWP operations to achieve cost and revenue efficiency in order to minimize rate impacts. Analyze and develop cost of service finance and rate plans every 5 years for consistency. Maintain City Council approved cash reserve balances as a minimum, and establish an internally funded capital project program to address core infrastructure needs, sometimes referred to as the pay-go capital. And this is where we would set our rate schedule such that we could fund our capital programs internally and not have to go out for those bond issues, especially as it related to what I call more routine type of infrastructure upgrades. Wires, poles, transformers, pipes, valves. Obviously, if you get into a unique situation, a new reservoir, the overhaul of a substation or the construction of a new substation, then that's that kind of project that you might look towards bond financing to work your way through. But as far as what I would call our established ongoing maintenance, we wanted to do that from an internally funded program versus issuing debt. And then this is just an example of the electric rates that shows you that inconsistency I spoke of. So here we had in 06, 07, an 11.7, nearly 12% rate increase. Came back the next year with a 5.1% rate increase. And then we went 5 straight years with nothing. And that put us in a pretty precarious situation in both our operating and our reserve levels and our capital programs. And that's when we then came back with the next 5-year rate schedule that just ended this past fiscal year, or is in place to end at the end of June, and that was the 87522 that I spoke of earlier. So that just shows you that sporadic nature, and I don't think this is conducive to running an efficient business, whether it's a utility or any kind of business. I think it better to consistently look at where you're at and try to make those adjustments more in the area of a consumer price index or the smaller adjustments as the economy grows, or you're faced with something in the electric utility industry and the water industry both. There's a lot of regulation that we have to face. There's the whole renewable situation in electric. So those kind of things are things that we have to make adjustments to. But I think for the most part, if we're looking at keeping pace with the economy and some of the obligations we have, whether they're labor and benefits packages, I think it behooves us to look at that on a regular basis and make the small incremental increases that are necessary versus having these wild fluctuations. The financial plan development, the development of each 5-year finance and rate plan begins with the development of a cost of service analysis. And we retained the services of 2 firms, NewGen Strategies and Solutions handled our electric rate review, and Raftelis Financial Consultants conducted our water rate review. Tony Georges from NewGen is here, and you're going to hear him talk in a few minutes about the process we went through with electric. And Sadir Parawala is here from Raftelis to talk about the same for the water operations. COSA goals: evaluate and identify the total cost required to operate the utility over the study period, and then calculate the optimal mix of debt and rate, i.e. cash, funded portions of the capital program to provide financial stability over the study period. Again, that whole idea of wanting to make sure that we have a good handle on where we're going for a 5-year period and that we don't have wild fluctuations. And of course, in both cases of water and electric, we must adhere to Propositions 26, that's electric, and Proposition 218 for water. And both Tony and Sadir are going to talk a little bit about what those requirements are and how those translated into the proposed rate schedules we have for the next 5 years. So I think we're going to electric, and with that, I would ask Tony to come on.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
I had a question there. Can you explain what this cash stands for when you say debt and rate in cash?
Can we go back? Oh, no.
Yeah.
One more. Forward. Yeah. One more.
Yeah.
So you have what cash on hand you have in reserve levels versus what you need to bring in from revenue, and that goes into when you calculate your obligations that you are projecting for the 5-year period. And Tony and Sudhir both are going to talk in more detail about those. So I think your question will get answered probably one or more times as we proceed through this. If not, please stop us, and we'd be happy to at the point where we see the nexus to discuss that a little bit further. So with that, Tony, it's all yours.
Thank you, Steve. So next slide. Again, just to introduce myself, as Steve mentioned, my name is Tony Georges with New Gen Strategies and Solutions. I'm the president of the energy practice. Myself and I have Joel Sangster here with me. We perform the cost of service analysis and study and the rate design study and results. I did want to clarify as we get started, excuse me, in the results of our study, there are two pieces to the rates for Glendale Water and Power, which are very typical of all electric utilities. We have base rates and cost adjustments, and if you're familiar, this may be a review for everyone, but base rates reflect the majority of costs for Glendale Water Power. These are the typical O&M costs, operating maintenance costs, the cost for labor, the cost for cash-funded capital, as Steve alluded to. And then the cost adjustments are typically used to manage the difference between projected and actual costs for specific items. And there's 3 cost adjustment tools that Glendale Water and Power has. These are actually not used in a significant way, or I guess in a large way for Glendale Water and Power. Some utilities use these. There's a very large cost adjustment component to their rates. In Glendale Water and Power's case, most of it's in base rates. But of the 3, only the regulatory adjustment charge, the RAC, is the one that is currently being used. And as we'll see in a few slides, that is actually being eliminated as of July 1st. For fiscal year 19. So as of July 1st, all 3 of the adjustment charges will go to 0, and it'll just simply be the base rates that will be included in the bill. Next slide. Just a couple of changes from the previous cost of service. There was so the cost of service process is a process, is an cost accounting process. We're identifying all the costs to operate the utility on a cash basis. Those costs are then compared to what the current revenues are projected to be over that study period, that 5-year period. We compare those two to identify which classes are under or overpaying, or what overall system rate increases may be necessary to fund the operations of the utility and the capital needs of the utility. But based upon the new COSA, the one that we just completed, the current revenues collected from the residential class, so the projection for the residential revenues over the 5-year period are significantly below what the costs are to serve that customer class. And in tandem with that, the commercial side, the cost to serve the commercial side are slightly lower than what the current revenues are, so there's kind of a balancing there. It's not uncommon, it's quite common. We see that. There's always, rates are not perfect in any way, shape, or form, so there's always a little rebalancing that happens. In this case, with Prop 26, the influence and impacts that has, we are designing residential rates to move closer to the cost of service over a period of time, gradually, step by step. And then secondly, time of use rates have been redesigned. Currently, the GWP time of use rates, there is a differential in the cost you pay for what we call on-peak and off-peak, or base and peak periods. So the warmer parts of the day, you're likely paying more for the cost of power, or for your power and electricity. In the off-peak times, the evenings and nighttime, you're paying less. We are redesigning those to better incentivize off-peak usage. So for those of us who may have an electric vehicle, to plug that in at night and receive a lower cost of electricity, and also give an opportunity for customers to shift their consumption and lower their bill. So that opportunity will exist in the recommended rates. Again, 3 additional elements from the prior cost of service. PAYGO, the way I would categorize PAYGO is more like the checking book. This is in regards to what Steve mentioned, the cash generated from rates, paying for your capital. So as you're generating cash each year from the sale of electricity, there is a component in there that's funding capital to the tune of, I believe, about $27 million on average over the 4-year period. So investments of about $27 million a year to pay for capital, which is the place that It's a place that we'd recommend a electric utility to be as far as funding that capital investment out of cash rather than fully debt service all the time. It's a stronger financial position. Maintaining the City Council approved reserve fund levels. We have some additional information on that if needed, but we are maintaining that. We are utilizing a slight bit of reserves, cash reserves, so the cash in the bank, the savings account, to fund actually some of the under recovery that we're going to see. And then Grayson Power Project, the Grayson Repowering Project is included in our numbers that you see today in this 5-year forecast. So we are looking forward all the way to fiscal year 2023. So we have considered the impacts, cost savings, and also the cost to repower Grayson in these numbers that you'll see. So the results on a system-wide basis, so we've been stating this is an average impact across the entire system, all customer classes. As Steve showed you that graphic that had 5 years without any rate increases, and then I think it was 8, I can't remember the exact numbers, 8%, and then tailed off towards the end. This is a similar type of impact and result. So for next year, for next fiscal year, starting July 1st, there is no scheduled rate change for the overall system. All rates will remain the same, with the exception of the reduction of the RAC. So it'll essentially be an effective rate decrease or bill decrease for everyone on the system. Fiscal years 20 through 23, we do see a 0.5% increase across the entire system, and then 1, 1, and 1 for the final 3 years. Again, system-wide basis, the class results are a little bit different. So the impacts you'll see in residential, the results that you'd see in commercial, and the results you'd see in industrial are a little bit different. There's some shifting there, as we alluded to. Some of the major findings and recommendations. As I've mentioned a few times, year one, the regulatory adjustment charge will be eliminated, so that drops off of the bill, so there'll be a decrease in your overall bill. That is the adjustment component of the cost, the pass-through cost and rate for Glendale Water and Power customers. In year two, rates will remain steady or experience a continued decline. There are that small rate increase starts to be implemented in phase 2 or year 2. But we will see the bills actually remain lower due to the elimination of the RAC than they are currently. So there are essentially 2 years where the bills are lower than they are currently. But we do begin over a period, we actually have a 9-year phase-in for the residential class. We're looking obviously just a 5-year window here for the residential class rate changes. And then to reduce, as I mentioned, the 9 years, but we have 4 years of rate changes for residential. The remaining 5 years are to come with the next rate study, which I would assume would happen after your fiscal year 2023. So these are the taking, as you see on the left column here, you'll see each of the fiscal years, starting with fiscal year 18-19 down to 22-23. You'll see the slide we just mentioned, the 0, half, 1, 1, 1, as far as the rate changes for the overall system. We now see those adjustments now cascading into and applied to each of the Glendale Water and Power customer classes. So if you look at fiscal year 18-19, there is no adjustment for the base rates, and those adjustments are only for the base rates. That's not for the adjustment charges. You will see an effective revenue adjustment of a 4% decrease. That is due to the RAC, the regulatory adjustment charge, being eliminated. So you see those impacts, and there's a reduction in bills on an average. The residential, small business, medium, and large business, those numbers reflect the change in an average customer's bills over those 5 phases or 5 years. So in the first phase, you'll see residential decreases by $3.07, all the way across to large business decreasing by $726.89. And then subsequent years, you can see after the decrease of the RAC, we then see the impact of the rate increases being implemented for the residential class. It's a 3% per year phase-in for the residential class, starting in that fiscal year 19 and 20. So you'll see an increase of $2.36, and then going down that column there for residential, you'll see it end up at $2.65. Under $3 a month impact to our average residential bill as far as what those rate increases look like. The 5-year average there being $1.40 for residential, and the cumulative or compounded impact of those rate changes being 9.2% over that 5-year period. So a little under 2% effective rate impact year over year.
And I think here's just a point of clarification is when you look at that proposed revenue adjustment column, you see those numbers, and some folks will say, well, that's not exactly what that's not what every class is paying because of the inequity in the classes and our mandate to bring equity to those classes. So you see the proposed revenue adjustment has a cumulative percent change of 3.6, while in the residential, it is much higher, as Tony said, about 3% a year. So you're looking at 9% after the adjustments made in the first year, while the commercial classes across the board are all going to be overall cumulative a negative impact over the full 5 years. So you're seeing that especially when you look at the large business, we're pretty well out of whack when it comes to the issue of equity amongst classes. So we are attempting to move in that direction. As Tony said, we are doing it over a 9-year period. We just thought that the impact to try to do it in any shorter period would be significant. So we feel as comfortable, as I look at Ms. Cadenas, as comfortable as you can that will be acceptable. But at the end of the day, we will not have equity until we were getting to that 10-year or 9-year point. So sorry, Tony, go ahead.
And it's a very common issue for most utilities, and I would say this gradual approach to incremental adjustments, it allows customers time to change behaviors or react to the new pricing signals or options and time of use rates if they need that option. But this is an industry and best practice to gradually adjust rates over time rather than shocking everyone with a large rate increase all at once, or a large rate shift from commercial and residential. This is just a graphic and a bar chart to show you the overall load for the electric utility. Really the key point here, you can see the first 3 years on the left side, the first 3 bars, fiscal year 15, 16, 17, obviously being historical, what we actually experienced for Glendale Water and Power. The subsequent years are the projected and forecasted years that we've included in our financial forecasting model. The one thing I would highlight here is just you'll see a very flat load here overall, extremely common in California, if not declining in many places. Many utilities are actually seeing a slight decline in overall load. It's coined demand destruction, energy efficiency, demand response, and demand DSM type of efforts along with distributed energy resources. A number of new technologies in the market are really suppressing customer consumption. Similar in the water space as well. Conserve, more efficient, and the difference in electric being the distributed energy resources. But that stability there, is that flatness, we can't really rely on growth to fund new investments in the system. So that's why you're seeing the rate changes suggested and recommended. Again, common throughout the country, and in California, in many places, you're seeing a decline in load. Next slide. We have a couple slides on average residential monthly bill and the low income. This is simply a chart that shows the total bill for a residential average customer. This is on a monthly basis. I know there is billing, obviously, in GWP on a bi-monthly basis. This is for a quote-unquote average customer from the residential class using about 400 kilowatt hours a month or 800 kilowatt hours over a 2-month period. The overall bill there is at the very top in black. You'll see in 2018, the overall bill at 404 kilowatt hours is $75.89. You can see the 2 pieces that make up that total bill. The blue portion of that bar, the $64.69, is the variable charge or the kilowatt hour charge. The purple portion is the fixed charge or the customer charge. You can see that being about $11.19 currently. You can see that in year 1 or phase 1 that there's no change there. There's the elimination of the RAC, so the bill comes down. You can see the dotted line in red being a line across the entire graphic showing you what the current bill is, showing you where the subsequent bills lie in relation to the average bill. You can see it takes until year 3 until you're actually above what you are currently with those rate changes that we've recommended. You will see that in the purple portion, you will see the fixed charge or that customer charge increasing over time. That is, again, when we perform a cost of service study, we not only look at the customer classes and the overall system, we also look at the charges and how you're recovering those specific costs. The cost to operate an electric utility are highly fixed. In Glendale's case, almost 70% of the costs incurred to operate the utility are fixed. Only about 30% are variable. And you can see those numbers are essentially flipped in this residential bill. Again, extremely common. It's a situation across the country. And I would say in every single cost of service study I have done and rate recommendation, I've recommended adjustments to the fixed charge to bring that more in alignment and equitable with the costs incurred by the utility. So we do that over a period of 5 years, up to $19.36 in the last year, with a total bill of $82 at the end of that 5-year period in 2023. Next slide. This is a similar graphic for low-income class. Again, a typical or average customer being 280 kilowatt hours per month or 560 per 2 months. You can see the current bill roughly is $53.67 under that consumption basis. You can see the total bill would be $53.67, but the discount currently is $13 that's applied. You can see that that discount has been increased, or there's a proposal, I believe, to increase that by $2 to now $15 as a discount to the low-income customers. So you see a net bill actually reducing the first 2 years, again, similar to residential, will be below where they're at currently in low income. And it'll take until 2021 until it's about, 40 cents above where it is now, from $40.67 to $41.07 in 2021 with the subsequent rate changes. Next slide. These are some bill comparisons, benchmarking Glendale Water and Power's average kilowatt hour or average residential customer benchmark to others. You can see in the center there, you can see GWP current, that's the current rate. You can see the proposed rate in year one and benchmarked against Burbank, Pasadena, LADWP, and Southern Cal Edison. So you can see right the $72.82, the GWP proposed amount being at the higher end, but basically right in line with other municipal utilities in Southern California. That concludes the electric portion of the cost of service results. If you have any questions?
We can either move into water or ask questions of Tony while he's here on the electric COSA.
Commissioners, if you have
yes
questions.
now, on
Yeah.
electric while you're up. Yeah. So you mentioned the you've calculated in terms of the cost the upgrade to Grayson.
Mm-hmm.
So you also talked about pay-go. So, but my recollection is we're not doing pay-go. Can you speak to how Grayson costs were calculated?
The way you're funding, the way utilities fund capital improvement, there's really kind of three levers you can pull to fund capital improvements. You have cash generated from rates, you have your cash reserves, or you have debt. In the financial forecast we've completed, if we just set Grayson aside for a second, we're paying for all capital that's outside of Grayson with cash from rates or a portion of contribution from reserves. The reserves are being slightly drawn down over the 5-year period, I think to the tune of about $10 million over the course of the period. So we're funding a little bit out of our savings account per se and the reserves, but almost the vast majority of it out of cash from rates. Grayson is 100% debt funded. And the way we structure that in the model, we have what we call capitalize the interest. So we've basically deferred those payments until Grayson is operational. And that's something that would be worked out with the folks financing the project, but that's typically what is done to align the asset life and the operation with when the debt service comes on board. But we have expected or we forecasted to fund debt service for Grayson.
So just to elaborate, this was the mechanism in which we could evaluate what the impact of Grayson would be. This was the financial mechanism to do that. So, I could speculate based on what I see and what I can project, but with Tony doing it from a more scientific basis and certainly the accepted practice for state law, we got then a definitive answer on what that would be. And the bottom line is, and Tony described how that goes out, but the bottom line is the Grayson project did not have an impact on rates either way. So the proposal was what was proposed prior to us doing any of the evaluation. Once the evaluation was done, it simply confirmed what we had thought, and these rates do not include any type of increase for Grayson, for financing the Grayson project. And we did, from a budgetary standpoint, it's a little different than the COSA, we took Grayson out of the budget, so it's not in the budget until such time as it is actually approved.
Got it. Different question. Can you go to the slide that deals with low-income customers? I think that's it. Right? So glad to see we're increasing the discount. Can you speak to, so I don't recall, refresh my memory in terms of regulation as it relates to fairness among classes of customers and how we're able to achieve the increase in discount for low-income customers?
Right, that's an excellent question, actually. So the Proposition 26 applies that very strictly across those classes. The one difference in this particular case is the public benefit charge program. So this is a program that was put in place by the state legislature, and it allows you to collect additional monies on the rate that is segregated very strictly through the California Energy Commission, and those monies can be used for very specific programs. To be honest with you, most of them are all energy efficiency programs. This is where our solar incentive or our solar rebate programs come from. We build EV charging stations. We put in demand management programs. This is what funds that. But there is a component that allows you to subsidize the rates of qualifying low-income households. This is considered to be separate from ratepayer money in that it is specifically earmarked for these type of programs. So that's why it is separate from Proposition 26. Do you have any more?
Mr. Zernan, Commissioner Camargo, if I can add to that. So the public benefits charge is a charge that predates Proposition 26 on the bill. And by increasing it from $13 to $15, it's a shift in the budget. So GWP every 2 years, I believe, puts together a public benefits charge budget and determines how the funds that are collected are allocated to different programs, energy efficiency, low income. So this would be a change in that budget to accommodate a higher low income rate, but it would not trigger a Prop 26 issue.
And it's a proposal that will be considered by the City Council along with all of their budget review and deliberations and consideration.
Understood.
So we're proposing to the council to raise it by $2 for this particular category.
Got it. Thank you.
Sorry. Well, first, I attended one of those outreaches, at least the one at Spard High. Tough crowd, so I want to just...
It wasn't that bad.
Well, I want to congratulate you guys for, staying calm, and it takes a lot of effort to stay focused. But, so back to my questions here. Let's get the good stuff out. Pay as you go, I like that. I always like pay as you go. And it seems we are beginning to implement that. And I assume we are where we are with Grayson at this point is because at some point we didn't do pay as you go for 15, 20 or some years. So is this going to be our policy going forward so that we go continuously with pay as you go except for the Grayson upgrade?
That is my hope, Mr. Kadikian. I would have the caveat, though, that there are, outside of Grayson, whether that is a project that eventually gets approved or not, or what iteration it gets approved in, there are other projects, as I said. If we were to replace a reservoir, if we were to build a new substation, those generally are pretty high-dollar items. We may consider debt financing on those depending on what the cost is. But pay-go for what our annual responsibilities are with regards to keeping the infrastructure up, that is absolutely our goal.
I'm hoping for more than an annual. I'm hoping, like, one example, we have a generator, we know it's going to last 40 years. Are we putting money aside every year so that on year 40, we've got the money to just pay for it?
I wouldn't say that we are depreciating the asset, there's no question. But a lot of times the asset will last a lot longer than the depreciation schedule dictates. So we are trying to keep pace with that gap, if you will. But you make a good point about Grayson. We don't want to find ourselves in that situation, even if it is on a smaller level with a substation or a reservoir. So
that's what I'm hoping for.
One comment I'd make on the debt financing side. You do, obviously, it was one of those levers you can pull, one of those tools, but you also, for something like Grayson or a large substation, as Steve alluded to, you typically do want to spread those costs out over the life of those assets to help align with how ratepayers are paying for it. Sure. So you want to balance that. But the pay-go structure that is included in the forecast is a financially strong one and benefits the community and the utility.
And that's a good point. If you're putting in a major asset that has a 30-year life, you'd like to spread that over the cost or over that 30 years because the users are going to be using it for 30 years. So you look into that. Is it equitable that we front load that and the ratepayers today pay the full burden, or do we spread that over time? But those are all considerations. But back to, the main point is that is our objective and our goal is to keep pay-go as a standard.
And time of use, which we are incentivizing, I assume will help us keep the peak down at the same time, if possible, so that we can distribute the energy more.
That would be the idea, if you can get people into that mode. And I will tell you in all honesty, it appears to me that there's a trend in the industry to move towards time of use as a standard. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about that, and that may come to fruition here as well. But yeah, the idea being certainly that you want people to change their habits so that they're using their energy at the off-peak time when it's cheapest, and then you pass along the benefit of less expensive energy to them. So do your laundry after 8 and all those kind of things.
I mean, those are all good things, and it's good we're implementing them in our rates, and that's the point I'm trying to make. With regards to the COSA and the shifting of the cost, I always like it when it's equitable, when people are paying their fair share, whether it's residential or large businesses, but there's a huge shift here. Residential over the next 5 years is going to jump 9%, 9.2%, and the small and large business is dropping 7.9%. I see the numbers. I don't see why that's happening. And I understand because maybe in the past it wasn't taken into consideration. All that is going to come up in the COSA once we get it?
Yes, you'll see a little bit more detail in that in the COSA. We're hoping that the legal review of that will be completed we're hoping by end of business today. And then we'll have that draft document available for everyone. But I think some of the issues with Glendale Water and Power that are a little unique and that affect that rate is we are essentially a residential utility. 75,000 of our 89,000 meters are residential. So you can imagine the cost of the infrastructure, as Tony indicated, the infrastructure costs are some of the highest single costs that any utility has. Most of those are concentrated to the single family. The commercial sector, for instance, at our industrial level, I think we have 230, something like that, customers. So you can imagine the infrastructure impact is significantly less for them, even though they are a larger generator of revenue. So trying to equate those is where you run into that issue. If we had more equity amongst the classes, just in this is how much residential we have, this is how much commercial we have, this is how much industrial. I'll give you an example. Burbank has about 35,000 less meters than we do, but they have significantly more commercial revenue and their revenue is not very far away from us. In fact, in most cases, they're considered a larger utility because of the amount of money that they take in. A lot of that has to do with a very robust commercial sector. We just don't have it. Pasadena has a more robust commercial sector. So, and Mr. Kadiki, yeah, you're right. It is a lot to bite off, but that's why we wanted to go with a phased-in approach. The 10 years was our goal, and we were successful in at least getting the team, including our outside legal counsel, to agree to that.
No, again, I repeat, I'm all for everybody paying their fair share. It's just, if we, at least from what I saw at the Spar Heights meeting, if the COSA was out there and people had seen, they may have not been as tough a crowd as it was. But apart from that, that's the point I'm trying to make. Also, we indicate the rate increases overall as 0.5111, but I think our residents would like to know their bill on a percentage-wise how much is going to be. At least the residential, that's probably 1%, 2%, 3% compounded, and it's also helpful if you just tell the people, because if you don't, then they're just going to assume and go into conspiracy theories. So I don't know. My approach is, if you've got the COSA, put it out. I know it's not finished, but next time around, put it out, let people see, and let them come with comments instead of speculations.
And I don't disagree. We'll get that COSA out as soon as we can. We ran into a lot more review than we had anticipated. And as happens with COSA, and Tony's done a lot more of these than I have, there's a lot of changes. It's a very fluid document. And each one of those has to then be reviewed by the attorneys, which is a good thing. But you're right. I think, we were, as Tony indicated, for the residential, it's more like 3% versus 1%. And the other thing that we did and we offered and we will continue to offer is we have the ability, if you actually tell us your account number or call us in at customer service or bring your bill in, we'll do a rate calculation and show you over the 5 years based on what you've used about what you could expect. And that's even a lot truer document. So we had folks there, as you know, at the meeting, and we would be more than willing to do that for people that are interested in their individual bill, because this is just an average.
And one piece I will add on the residential side, kind of contrasting this COSA with the prior COSA, Glendale Water and Power's investment in AMI actually bears quite a bit of fruit for the financial analysis and the econometric analysis we do for cost of service. So that gives us much more granular, specific, defensible data about how customers are using the system, what their load profiles look like. So that data was incorporated in this COSA where it wasn't available previously. That more granular information, we didn't have to guess as to what's going on. We knew exactly. So that information actually resulted in some of differences in shifting of those costs more equitably, as you see in this in these slides.
Yeah. And I also know that the executive summary of the COSA was partially released. I'm not sure if that's going to be revised or is that set, because I wanted to ask something about that, but it's not in here, so.
Okay, yeah, that document hasn't changed, and we posted that almost 2 weeks ago. But Tony and Sudhir would be happy to answer any questions.
So on that one, in 2021, the debt servicing is jumping from like 12 million to 40 some million. It's about 35 million jump. That's mostly for Grayson?
It's all for Grayson.
All Grayson. And that's a conservative debt service estimate that we had based on today's rates, and we were very conservative.
Because, I mean, just a rough calculation, even if we fund the project as indicated at 500 million, we were estimating the annual interest payment and what have you would have been 28 million. I was wondering where that extra 7 million came from.
Conservative estimate.
Okay.
We fully expected it to be closer to that 28, but given time, we don't know where rates are going. There's a lot of threat that the rates are going to go up, so we put in a very, very conservative number. Tony,
Yeah, and it is a full debt service amount, so that's the principal and the interest payment on the servicing of the debt for Grayson, or the expected outlay. We're also what we're doing is capitalizing, and we as a consultant have assumed this, and I would guess that the financing support for Glendale Water and Power would do something similar, the bond council would, to capitalize the interest associated with that, because it takes a 18-month, 24-month, you've got a long lead time to build and get that project up and running and actually generating revenue for the utility. So typically what happens, you'll capitalize that interest, defer those payments until the asset is actually used and useful. So you're aligning those payments with when you would be using that asset and receiving those revenues.
I'm not an expert in bond by any means, but the way when you negotiate a bond, do you get the whole 500 million up front, or can you get it in pieces and not pay interest?
You take the whole, they fund it at one time. And so you could piecemeal the project and then issue multiple bonds. And we actually looked at that, but overall, from a financial benefit standpoint, we felt that a single bond issue was best. And that was a lot of outside counsel plus our own CFO.
And the city council hasn't decided what they're going to do with regards to Grayson at this point.
That's correct.
If they do something less and then the fee is less, the cost is less, are these going to be readjusted, or we'll wait for the next 5 years and adjust it that way?
It depends, because we've got this towards the end. If it was significant enough, we'd look at the potential for an adjustment, and it's possible one of our adjustment charges could take that into consideration when we get there. So yeah, we will look at this. The adjustment charges, by the way, as Tony pointed out, we're going to zero on those, but we are not eliminating them. So we look at those twice a year, and those adjustment charges, regulatory would be something that they would take into effect. This we have an energy which allows us to meet the fluctuations in the gas market, the fuel market, which can vary widely. And then the third one, the decoupling charge, is something that's rather unique to utilities. As of last year, it was only LADWP and I think Glendale Water and Power that had it. It's something that's much favored in the environmental advocacy community. What it essentially does is it allows you to adjust your revenue stream based on what your sales are. So it doesn't. There's a lot of folks that think if you set your rates or you set your revenues at the beginning of the year without any flexibility, you may be less likely to incentivize alternative energy sources such as solar. So the decoupling allows you to make a rate adjustment to ensure that your revenue stream maintains where you needed it to be, and at the same time, you don't have to encroach into the development of renewable or other alternative energy sources. We received a nice letter of appreciation from the National Resources Defense Council when Council approved that 5 years ago.
My last comment, and it's just a comment, I'm not asking you a question about it because it's not fair. That transfer of 20 million, I disagree with. I know there's litigation, so I'm not going to ask questions because I know the answer I'm going to get. But I just disagree, and I'm putting that on the record, about that transfer, that's all.
I have a question. Thank you very much for your presentation. First, concerning the consumption, you compared Glendale to other cities, and you said that other cities, the consumption was decreased, and ours was flat. And you interpreted that efficiency compensated the growth. So my question is that we are not working on efficiency side, or our growth is higher? So how you compare with other cities from that
I
aspect?
think, I don't know what the exact percentages year over year are for the load growth or the expected load forecast, but I want to say they were roughly 0.5%, but very much in line with the typical electric utility in today's marketplace. There are some municipal utilities that is changing to some degree, actually, with potential for marijuana in the communities and the grow houses, the grow facilities, because those are very high energy users, very high load factors, almost like a data center, which actually would boost growth. And some utilities are actually now, with the passage of the recreational marijuana, are looking at marijuana as a way to boost their sales. But outside of that, communities like Palo Alto, who we worked with in the past, they're very aggressive with distributed energy resources, a different customer base that's investing in that very, very heavily. They're seeing decline in load, and Alameda is another one that's seeing some flat to declining loads. So it's not uncommon, but it's not like they're declining by 1 or 2% per year. It's 0.5% plus or minus, basically. So that comment of Glendale is not maybe doing enough for energy efficiency or something. It's not necessarily that. It's just a mixture of the growth and the energy efficiency in the market, in addition to distributed energy in the marketplace. That's just the net effect that we see.
And our additions over the last several years have been a lot of the downtown development and the residential coming in. So we've been adding meters in that respect, although those are efficient meters, as we like to say. Those are buildings that are more efficient because they're new and built and efficient appliances. I think it also says something to those other utilities that I mentioned have higher commercial revenue. It tends to be the commercial sector that sort of leads the way in conservation because it's a bottom line issue. And then you see residential is a little bit slower in that regard, or less incentivized a lot of times to conserve. Whereas, again, if it's part of your business model and it's saving you money, you may be more inclined to do that. But at the end of the day, as Tony said, we're seeing it flatten, and it will continue to remain pretty flat, if not decrease, up until the time that we see something injected into the market that'll drive it in a different direction. And that could very well be electric vehicles. The electrification of the transportation system could very well have a tremendous impact on this. As Tony said, a lot of people, depending on what they adopt in their particular agency with regards to marijuana, are seeing some of those increases. We've also seen the other one is Bitcoin mining, where we've seen some interest. Those usually target the very lowest electrical rates they can, but this can send, the state of Washington, which traditionally has some of the lowest rates in the nation, the Bitcoin mining industry has gone there, and boy, they can really drive your consumption up tremendously. They were talking about 100 megawatt projects that these folks would come in with. So we likely aren't going to see that because in California and Southern California, rate structures are a little higher, but that's another trend that some folks are seeing as tremendous impact on their electrical usage going up. So I think we're more likely to face increases as a result of the electrification of the transportation system. We'll see where the issues with buildings go and how the electrification of buildings, at least for heating, water, and space. But I think the EV market is where you might see the jump, especially if some of California's pretty lofty goals are realized in development of that infrastructure. We're hearing not only the vehicles for residential and general consumers, but it's really over-the-road freight hauling that's taken off. And so if you electrify that particular part of the industry in California, you could see a tremendous increase. I know Edison is looking at that along with LADWP.
Any further questions, commissioners?
One final question. How is Southern California Edison able to get that $52.29 when we are at 75?
Well, one thing you'll see with Edison is they have the old higher commercial, lower residential I don't believe they're Prop 26. They don't have to abide by Prop 26 because it's not considered a tax because they are an investor-owned utility. They go through a different process. So they don't have to have that same equity, and they kind of adopt that old school model where you'll see that if you were to see their commercial rates, they're going to be higher, but that helps subsidize their residential rates.
Okay.
I think I'm right on that. Is that about right? Okay.
Any further questions, commissioners? All right, thank you very much.
Then we will go right into water. Sudhir will come up and
Good afternoon, President Lal, members of the Commission. Again, my name is Sudhir Pardiwala. I'm with Raftalis Financial Consultants, an Executive Vice President and the Project Manager for the Water Rate Study. As you're aware, the water rates are subject to very stringent regulatory requirements, and we followed industry standards, specifically the American Water Works Association standards, to ensure that your rates are consistent with cost of service principles. What I'd like to do today, I have a very brief presentation to discuss some of the changes from the previous work on the COSA. We'll then review the financial plan to look at the overall revenue adjustments, the results of the study, and then the impacts on different customer classes. So first of all, we are, as opposed to electrical, we are not doing any debt financing of any of our capital projects. So we will be doing entirely, it's going to be rate funded and partially from reserves. The capital costs are going to be allocated based on cost of service principles again. 55% of the cost will be on the variable rate and 45% is on the fixed rate. This first slide addresses the fixed charges. So we've taken some of the fixed costs and put them into the fixed charges. The fixed costs that on the meter charge, we have what we call the customer's charge. It's composed of two components, the customer charge and the capacity charge. The customer charge includes things like meter reading, billing, and so forth, which are the same for all customers. And the capacity charge is cost related to the capacity of the meter. The larger meters impose larger demands on the system and therefore pay a larger share. So those costs are proportional to the hydraulic capacity of the meter. Okay, next slide. In addition to the meter charges, on the variable side, we have reduced the number of tiers on single-family customers from 4 to 3. So the current tiers, monthly tiers, are 6 units, 12 units, 25 units, and anything over 25. So on the first tier, we have increased that from 6 to 8, the second tier from 12 to 15, and then anything over 15 falls in the third tier rate. The reason for doing this is essentially to provide the indoor domestic use, which is approximately 8 units for an average single-family residence in that first year. The 15 units represents the average demand of your single-family customers throughout the year. So that is the rationale for setting up those tiers.
And just if I can interject, a unit is 100 cubic feet. So when Sudhir refers to a unit, it's 100 cubic feet. And that's what we built on.
Unit has 100 cubic feet, right? We haven't finished with that. In addition, we are reducing the recycled water rates and the fire line rates. And lastly, we also looked at the drought rates, and we've recalculated the increases that are needed if we have to go through mandatory drought restrictions. And that charge has been reduced from where we were previously.
And just a note on those are pretty significant. And again, I think we can speak to the automated metering system that's allowed us to get a better idea on usage. So those fire line charges on average are probably going down somewhere around 30%. The drought charges are being reduced significantly. As you may recall, we were one of the first agencies and only agencies to put in a drought-related charge as we anticipated mandatory drought conservation. And we just, at that point in time, using the data we had, made some assumptions, and we've been able to fine-tune those and reduce that dramatically. We're going by, I think it's 15 cents 100 cubic feet, or 15 cents a category.
For every percentage point, we have 1.5% increase in the rates. Yeah. So going to the financial plan, this is where we look at the total expenses of the utility, which includes capital and operating costs, and potential if you have any reserve requirements and debt coverage, and compare that to what we are collecting from non-rate revenues. And so when we compare those two numbers, then we come up with what kinds of revenue adjustments we need overall for the utility. And so we are looking at 1% each for the first 2 years, 1.5% in the third year, and then 2% in subsequent years. Now, what we have seen essentially is, because of the, if you go to the next slide, please. When you compare these revenue adjustments to what other utilities are seeing in Southern California, you'll find that we are actually doing much better. Most of the other utilities are doing double-digit revenue adjustments because of, we'll go to the next slide, we'll look at the water consumption patterns. So, no, go ahead, stay in that slide. To remain in compliance with 218, we have to determine the cost allocated to each class and make sure that those are proportional to the cost of providing service, not only within each class, but also within each class. Each tier has to be, we have to ensure that the rates are proportional to the cost of serving the water in those tiers. The result of the analysis basically is a decrease in the single-family residential and multifamily customers. Their rates will be going down, and commercial customers will be picking up the increases. This is the results of the cost of service analysis. So it's kind of opposite of what we saw on the electrical side. You'll see when you look at the impacts. Go ahead. Next slide. So here are the results of the revenue adjustments on each class. When we look at the rate structures, you will notice that the single-family class actually and the multifamily class, the average customer will see reductions in their rates, in their bills rather. And commercial and irrigation will see some significant increases in the first year. After that, all of the rates will increase by the percentages that we mentioned. So you'll see those are pretty consistent after the first year.
Can we go back to that slide for a second? I just want to point out a couple of things again, just to be consistent with what we talked about on electric. You look in the proposed revenue adjustments, and you see the cumulative figure of 7.7. This is a little bit different than, quite the opposite actually, of electric, where then you see single family and multifamily are below that, while commercial and the irrigation meters are above that, significantly above that. There is a caveat, and you see that in the asterisk there too. So in addition to 2018, you have a state water code that requires that your cheapest water essentially goes to the highest priority, which is domestic. So that means that you take the cheapest water and give it to the residential first until such time as it runs out, whatever that tiering situation is, and then you move up. So theoretically, the residential will be able to utilize the cheaper water, while the commercial and the irrigation get the more expensive water, and that's another reason why you see that increase. And I think when you look at something like a dedicated irrigation meter, I don't think there's any question that there's continued pressure from Sacramento to move away from, to move towards more water conservation, possibly away from irrigation, and look for alternatives in that regard. So I think you're seeing some of the water codes are actually manifesting themselves in that particular area.
So again, just like it is on the electrical side, you'll see basically the results of the drought that we had in FY16, where we had to undergo mandatory cutbacks. And we saw a pretty significant reduction in 16. We are beginning to see slight increases in the usage, and we see that increases happening this year, FY17 and FY18. And then we are basically looking at flat consumption, with the small increase that you see basically coming from the growth in the city. One of the things that we need to understand, however, is the moment you have a reduction in your water usage, we are going to see it has going to have an impact on your revenues. So you are going to have to increase rates. And that's what the drought chart basically does, is it looks at what happens when you have a reduction in your usage, because some of the fixed costs are in the variable rate. And so those have to be recovered then through increases in your variable rates. So this compares the single-family bill over the next 5 years, and you can see the current year we have the purple bar representing the fixed cost is $29, and the variable cost is $45, for a total bill of $74.60. We have dropped the fixed charge from $29 to $25, so low volume customers will actually will be benefited by this reduction in the fixed charges. You'll also notice that the overall bill in the first year in FY19 will drop by about $1.50. And even in next year, the following year in 2020, it is still going to be lower than what they are paying right now. So for 2 years, an average single-family customer will actually see a reduction in their bill. And then for subsequent years, as you can see, the increases for an average customer are very minimal, less than $1 per year. So this chart compares the water bill in the city with surrounding agencies. The dark green bar represents Glendale's current rates at $74.60, and the revised rate in the light green is $73.09. We are slightly higher than Pasadena and Burbank, but significantly lower than Los Angeles and Crescenta Valley Water District. Okay. So that completes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioners, questions?
I think the COSA has about 55 million in capital expenditures, approximately.
Yes.
Again, once the COSA comes out, we'll know what these capital expenditures are going to be.
So we'll have capital budgets listed in there, but as you may be aware, that so here's how it starts. We have a water master plan that identifies all of our infrastructure needs for a 10-year period. We then develop a budget off of that based on greatest need. And then we budget annually in the city of Glendale. So we'll take 1 year and include it as part of our capital improvement. And then when we get to a point of coming to council again with the individual project, we'll have a detail of where exactly those projects are. I can tell you that for the most part, these are going to be mainline replacements, replacing older pipe, upsizing where we need larger service, increasing pressure, and fire hydrants, fire suppression, ensuring we have that. So those are kind of the basic things. Valves, there may be some repairs to pump stations, but generally it's that kind of bread and butter, as I've called it before, infrastructure. So we'll have that whole list. I don't know if we presented the master plan to you, but it may be beneficial for us to show you and present that master plan to you so you get a concept of where we are from an infrastructure position. And then we'll take, as I said, need over the years. But essentially what we looked at was we could put together projects to sustain a $10 to $12 million annual budget. And so you're seeing over 5 years, I think our first budget year, I didn't want to put any significant capital until we had expended all of the bond proceeds I talked about earlier. So once those were exhausted, then we would begin to see the pay-go capital. In water, I think we start a little bit light with somewhere around $7.5 million, and we move that up. But that essentially is where you see the 55. But easily $10 to $12 million a year for us to keep the core bread and butter infrastructure up to speed. You saw that category, and I've said this before, or you saw that comparison with the city of LA and how high that is. I can guarantee you that a lot of that has to do with replacing aged, archaic infrastructure that's causing them a lot of problems with regards to failures of their system. I don't ever want to find us in that kind of situation.
With regards to the major findings and recommendations where the cumulative percentage change on single family and multifamily, single family is 4.8, multifamily is 6.7. Shouldn't that be the other way around? I would think multifamily would benefit from the bulk lower infrastructure cost, and I was wondering why would it be that multifamily's rates will increase more than single family when you've got miles and miles of pipes to lay down for single family?
So the way the water is allocated, it depends upon how we allocate the water. And so we've taken the low-cost water and allocated to accounts. Now, multifamily, the water usage per account is much higher than it is for single family. So what happens essentially, the single family benefits from lower cost water than multifamily does on a per account basis or a per dwelling unit basis even.
Electric everybody has an electric meter. Everybody has to have an electric meter. It doesn't matter. Not the same in water. So a multifamily building has one water meter. And usually what will happen is, for those of you who are either landlords or renters, you'll get that'll be part of your rent. So not everybody has that meter. So when we get the multifamily meters, you have these much greater charges, and you try to met out the cost to meet the equity standard that we've set.
Yeah, right. They also have larger meters per se, so, and when we did our cost of service analysis, one of the things that we found was that larger meters will be increasing, while the smallest size meter, both 5/8 and 3/4 are going down. The 1-inch meter actually is going up. What you saw on there was a 1-inch meter for the multifamily, so that also impacts the multifamily charges.
I do have a suggestion for next time maybe, and I don't know. Do we charge any elevation surcharge for single-family residents?
That's an outstanding question, and our chief AGM of water is probably back there smiling, but I assume you're talking about pumping charges.
Yeah, Mr. Michael last time gave
Yes.
a presentation, and I'm going to tell you it's an interesting story as to how this light bulb came.
It is, and it does make sense in some regards. We just think that we're continuing to evaluate it, and we weren't ready to do that. I think the impact could be significant in certain areas, and that would be for single family. So one of the things that Mike and his staff are doing is taking a look at our water storage operations and our water pumping operations and our electrical consumption, because he is one of the highest users of electricity in the city, and he'd like to bring that bill down as well. So I just think it's a great concept to look at. I don't know that we're quite ready for it, and we'll continue to study that.
Yeah. Because right after that meeting, I had to go to pick up my daughter from one of the mountains of Glendale. And my Prius was struggling to get up those mountains, and I'm thinking, who's paying for all this water pumped up all the way up here?
Right.
And as soon as I came down, I went on Google, and they give you the longitude, latitude, and elevation. And there's about 600 feet elevation difference between we, the people here, and them, the people up there. But anyways, just something to consider for the future.
So you have areas that are pumped and areas that are gravity fed, and there is a difference. So it's something we continue to look at.
We're
But it's
going to
it's
have a
good point.
family fight.
We could have a downhill discount.
On the sewer?
Yeah.
The sewer would have a great
You go
downhill
down.
Is there any pumps on the sewer?
No, you
there we go.
you don't need pumps in that situation.
Excellent. Commissioners, any further questions?
Yeah, I have one question. This is all the time it has been in my mind, The rate is usually gradually increasing.
Right.
And there are years that we have lots of rain and we have reserve water is very high, and the other time is not. So what is the effect of this rain and reserved water on rate?
Well, the city has 3 different sources of water. We have our wells, and we buy water from Metropolitan Water District. And we have certain rights and so we are assuming that we are getting all of our water rights. And so the analysis is essentially based on average conditions. We are using our water rights. How much water do we buy on average from Metropolitan Water District? And so those are fairly consistent. They remain consistent. So it does not impact the rates per se, because we are assuming the same water sources in all of the 5 years that we have. So the rain is not impacting us. What it does help might be the actual safe yield in the basin, or the amount of water that comes into the basin. That it might help to alleviate the situation there, if at all that becomes an issue. But it does not impact what the city basically is able to pump from the wells.
And in certain areas of the city, our water rights are very well defined. And so it wouldn't matter if there was excess water, we still only have a defined amount of water in which we can draw. In another part of the city, it's a little bit different. In the northern part of the city, it's a little bit different. So to the extent that we can see changes in that water levels, we possibly could. But we just haven't seen anything of significance. We saw large drops during the drought, but we haven't seen a lot of replenishment at this point in time. And maybe someday as we go down the line, you'll have things like recycled recharge and those kind of things as laws and technology develops, and that'll help us. But for this point in time, we just, the rain hasn't, it's had a negative impact, but it really hasn't had a positive impact on us. That's all we have.
Any further questions? Okay, should we move on to public comment? I have 4 cards. Mr. Bert Culver.
Hello, everybody. Well, I recently found out about the water rate increase from a letter that came to my house that said that the water and sewer rates are going to go up. It didn't say anything about electric rates. It was only until I saw something posted by a neighbor that GWP was also increasing my electric rates. This was just last week, and I wasn't able to attend the 2 public hearings that were held last week, and I only found out about those 2 meetings too late for me to attend. Less than a week later, they're showing the increase to you, and tomorrow at 10 a.m. they're showing the city council. I'm guessing you're not voting on it. That's, right?
I'm voting today, and I'm voting tomorrow.
Okay. All right. So we'll still have time to review. That's good to know, but it seemed sneaky. And on social media, people are quite upset because they seem like this is being snuck through. But
This was posted on social media as well.
okay, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Be there or fail. Okay, I haven't had enough time to study the proposed changes, but they look to me to be in the wrong direction for our city. The wrong direction is mainly the increase in fixed cost for all accounts. We want people to conserve electricity and water, and the best way to do this is to put any cost increase onto the cost of the resource rather than the monthly fixed cost of the bill. For example, the water they're putting, for water, they're putting 55% of the cost increase on the water and 45% on fixed price. And they instead, I think they should put all of the increase on the water so that people and businesses will be more likely to conserve. This would maximize the amount of conservation that would occur due to the price increase. Now, the second wrong direction is the increase in the Glendale Care low-income discount from $13 to $15 to help offset the increase. Instead of giving low-income people a discount, they should apply the money to efficiency measures for the accounts. For the $180 a year they are reducing these bills, they should be replacing old appliances, more old appliances, with Energy Star appliances, insulating walls, or replacing single-pane windows. The money for the discount comes from the public benefit charge on our utility bill, and instead of reducing demand with that money by improving the efficiency of low-income homes, GWP is basically giving it to themselves by using the public benefit charge to pay down bills. Or they could be more creative. For $30 a month, Los Angeles is currently leasing roof space from low-income homeowners for space for solar panels that feed into the grid. This allows the homeowner to pocket some money, incentivizes them to reduce their utility demand on their own, and puts renewable resources into the grid. It's a triple win and a great use of the public benefit charge. GWP is proposing to raise residential customer rates exclusively, electric rates. They say that this is due to bring them closer to funding their cost of services required by Proposition 26. But even today, they don't really explain what that means. You guys seem to understand, but I looked it up. I looked up Proposition 26, and all I could find was that Glendale lost a lawsuit about paying $20 million per year to the city. And that $20 million per year is still on the COSA, which, if they lost the lawsuit, really shouldn't be. But in any case, I couldn't find any reason why Proposition 26 means that only residential customers should have their rates increased. And I'd like an explanation for that. I'm specifically concerned about this increase as I live in the Glendale part of Montrose, and I get water from Crescenta Valley Water District and sewer service from GWP. So Crescenta Valley is raising their rates substantially this year as well. So I'm going to get hit twice for my water usage by fixed fees that I can't do anything about reducing from Crescenta Valley, and then my sewer fee is going to go up too. So overall, I'd like more time to look at these substantial changes, and I'd like GWP to consider raising the charge on water and electricity so that people can conserve. Also, I saw another item that coming up from City Council is GWP wants to buy 10 new garbage trucks. I don't know how many millions that costs, but should that be brought in front of the commission? I don't know. I would like them to consider doing a trial on electric garbage trucks, which LA and Sacramento are doing, but that's all. Thank you.
Madam President, if I may, refuse trucks and sewer are the Public Works Department. They would not come to this commission, so that's a different department altogether that handles that. At some point, if you'd like, Ms. Hartunian can come up and give you an overview of where the notifications were. As far as the PBC, there is there's a full budget on that, and it'll be presented tomorrow as well. And we do a lot of different things, including subsidizing the rate for low-income folks. So I'm sure the speaker, if he was wanting to present his thoughts to folks on a fixed income who struggle to pay their rent and their utility bills, that we should take that away. That's an interesting concept. But nonetheless, our PBC budget is pretty robust in a number of areas, not the least of which is incentives for the development of solar projects.
Yes, Mr.
I was going to ask, are we going to get an outline of the process as to, after today, it's going to go in front of City Council?
Yes.
And then at some point, it's going to be voted on? Is it going to come in front of this commission for a recommendation? What's the process? What are we expecting to do with regards to these rate increases here?
Today, if you want to make a recommendation, I'll defer to Ms. Godinez. You can. What I was bringing back to you next would be a budget presentation, which would include all of these things, including the CIP program, the PBC program, and so forth.
As agendized today, members of the commission, it's agendized as a report, not an action item. Individual members can certainly comment on how they feel about it, but as far as making a commission recommendation, that would not be something that's agendized today. That could be done through a special meeting or next month's meeting if timing permits, but I believe it's going to go at the beginning of next month to council. Is that the timing? The 22nd of May. So that's something that the council can consider when we get to agenda forecast.
Okay.
22nd May or 22nd June?
22nd of May.
Next speaker is Mr. Dan Brotman.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening. I just have a few things. One of them, I had a number of things actually which Mr. Kadikian already asked and got answered, so that's helpful. But just on this issue of notification and everything, I think it would be, I think part of the problem is that people don't really know what the process is. And we all got that thing in the mail talking about water rates and sewage, I think. And then on Wednesday at this meeting, the electric rates were also discussed. I think that just confused a lot of people. And people don't really understand what the process is. So they think, this is going to, be approved today or tomorrow at City Council or whatever. I think there's just a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. So I think it would be really helpful to get the COSA out, get the details out to people. I hope that we'll have plenty of time to look over it and study it and make comments. And I hope there's more outreach once, the full set of information is out. I just think that would be really helpful, because something like this, if it's not handled the right way, even if you've done everything, technically that you're supposed to do, if it's not handled the right way, I think there'll be a lot of blowback. So that would just be my recommendation. It's hard for me to make any real comments today because obviously I haven't seen the COSA, so I haven't had a chance to study it. I would definitely like to have a chance to be able to do that. Just on the financial numbers, I also, and maybe this is something that we can get a better explanation on later, but this whole point about Grayson and, not affecting utility rates going forward, when I look at the numbers on the surface, I see that debt service cost going up by $35 million, and I see something else, a capital paid from current earnings. I guess this is the pay-as-you-go type of expense. I see that dropping, but still, it looks like I don't know if these two are related to one another, but in any case, it looks like all or more than all of the increase, let me put it another way. More than all of the shortfall, of the revenue shortfall, right, is coming from kind of Grayson. So it's hard for me looking at this to see how we can say that Grayson isn't causing rates to go up. It looks to me that if that debt service increase wasn't happening, we'd be in a position to maybe cut rates. So I think it would really help. I know it would help me and a lot of other people to get that explanation a lot more clearly out to us as to why Grayson would not increase rates, because I think the perception is, of course it has to increase rates. So that would, I think, just be helpful for everyone to get that out. And, generally, kind of from the point of view of Glendale Environmental Coalition, we don't have a problem with higher rates, but we would like to see a rate structure, obviously, that does as much as it can, as can possibly be done to create incentives for energy efficiency, for residential solar and storage, and also for time shifting. So I hope that, when those details come out, I'm just hoping that we can be as robust as possible in not putting those costs into fixed charges, but into the variable costs, so that, especially at the higher tiers, that we really create very strong incentives for energy efficiency, and we don't do anything that would disincentive people from going to residential solar and storage. And if we're using our fixed charges as a primary mechanism to cover our revenue shortfall, then I think that's going in the wrong direction. So that's that perspective. But we don't have any problem per se with higher rates. In fact, higher rates on the upper tiers, I would say, are a good thing because they create the right types of incentives to conserve. I'm a big proponent of a carbon tax. It's the same kind of idea. I would like to see higher rates come in to hit kind of those heavy duty users. So I had one other point, which was just about our rates in general, and it's not that I'm complaining, but I'm kind of asking. I looked at the IRP from Burbank from 2015, a couple years old, but they have a list of municipal utilities and also investor-owned utilities, and they show average residential rates by kilowatt hour. And we are really at the top. I think we're number 2 on a list, and we're about 12% higher, at least we were at that time, 12% higher than LADWP, higher than Burbank, higher than Pasadena, higher than pretty much every other municipal utility that they measured. Now, sorry, that things may have changed, but I just want to put that out there because I heard that we are in line, and that's not what I saw in their document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brotman.
Just a comment, I think when we showed the comparison, we did show that we were a little bit on the upper end, and Mr. Brotman's not incorrect. On a per kilowatt hour basis, we're usually at the upper end. We try to get in the middle, but we're usually at the upper end. It has a lot to do with that. What I had explained to you about being we're a little weighted to the residential side more than most utilities, and that makes it a little more difficult to ship things. And I think some of the questions or issues that Mr. Brotman raised could be addressed in the COSA. So as soon as we can get that, and like I said, I'm hoping it's done by end of business today. That'll help, I think, at least lead him down the path of where he was going. He may or may not agree with it, but at least it gives some more explanation in those particular areas.
Okay, our next speaker is Sir Cobb Niazi.
Hi, good evening. I actually just had a couple of questions about the electric rate stuff that was being presented earlier. My main question is, there was some discussion about the time of use adjustments that would be there, and I'm not 100% sure what the structure of that is, but is that a base rate decrease and then a time of rate surcharge, or is there do charges come in based on exactly what time you've used and broken down like that on the bill? So that's my first question. The other question I had was about the electric usage projections that were shown relatively flat. Does that take into account expected higher adoption rates for electric vehicles? Because, like, I know for me, we're an all EV family now, and we're about 300 to 450 kilowatt hours more per month for that.
Well, I'll let Tony maybe talk a little bit about the TOU rates, but as I mentioned, we had not built any growth in there for the EV, and that's one area that we could see a lot of growth in. However, we are looking at the EV rates and attempting to get those into, ours are a little bit high, and so we'd like to look at those, and Tony can talk about more specifics on those as well. I think it's a good question.
Sure. So the time of use rates, the rate which you charge varies depending on the time of day. So there are currently, it's the B option for the rate class that you're in. So your L1 residential customer, your L1B rate is the time of use option. There's a limited number of customers.
Tony, you can talk to
You
them.
can
Sorry.
speak, yeah. We want to get your comments on the record.
So there's a limited number of people on the residential side in that L1 rate who have taken that option. But we are further incentivizing the off-peak versus the on-peak. And so I believe the hours right now are 8, I think it's 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. or what we call the on-peak or the peak period. So from 8 a.m. in the morning until 9 p.m. at night, I think those are the correct times on every weekday, Monday through Friday and non-holidays. You're paying a higher rate for electricity. On the other times, so from 9 p.m. on till 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. the next morning, you'll pay a lower cost or lower rate for that electricity. And that's across each of the different customer classes, residential, small commercial, medium, and large. We have recommended and presented some structures that increase the rate during the peak periods. We've shrunk the time period during the day, so we've reduced it to more, maybe a 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. time period versus basically the all daylight hours, and increased that rate during that period of time, and then lowered it during what we call the base period or the off-peak rate. So that will give customers an option, and will lower the cost for those with electric vehicles to charge their vehicles if they are charging them during off-peak periods.
The time of use program that we have in Glendale, it's something you have to sign up for, or?
Yes.
So it's not automatic?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
With the exception of large commercial customers, it's mandatory for them.
Okay, thank you.
So just to go back to the projected EV adoption, just looking at all of my friends and people around me, and just on my street, like how many more EVs I see now compared to when we moved to that street just a year and a half ago. It seems like, specifically in Glendale, because a lot of people have short commutes here, that I think there are a lot of small EV adoption here, and my expectation is that would have a significant impact, probably would show up like by the end of this year because of just how many people are just switching.
In the projections, as many as you see, they even our aggressive projections don't show a huge impact. Okay. My thinking is as we begin to move towards, you're beginning to see the auto industry react, things like the buses, the school bus systems. The school districts are looking at electrification of their bus systems. You're looking at the metros of the world, so even the largest bus systems, and that over-the-road freight hauling. When you begin to see all of those things combined, I think you're going to start to see an impact. What impact that'll be on Glendale, we'll see, but I can imagine you're going to see some. So right now, the growth has been good, but it hasn't been anything that has been debilitating for us from an infrastructure standpoint. But again, here we are with a rate restructuring that we hope further incentivizes the use of those vehicles. So we'll see where it goes.
Okay, David Diaz.
Good afternoon, I'm David Diaz. I live in Adams Hill. I want to reflect and support my friends Bert and Dan. My comments definitely won't be as sophisticated as Bert's work, but there's a couple things that I find important. Continuing on two themes. Mr. Kadajian mentioned hillside rates for water. I do live in a hillside, but I think you have a really good point because it basically means a middle or lower income are supporting the elite in the city that easily could afford a little of adjustment. I don't think it's going to break their back if their homes are worth 1.5 to almost $3 million. It also comes to the rate adjustment of the Prop 26 schedule where residential rates are increased and all the commercial small business are decreased. In other words, we're essentially subsidizing the commercial business community. I understand some of the rationale the general manager brought up to us, but these businesses are here and they're benefiting because of their location in Glendale. They're benefiting from the zoning, the residential, the parking infrastructure that we have given them. I don't think that they should have a dramatic benefit while residential rate users are being increased. I think that they can share a little bit more of this burden. Otherwise, well, quite obviously, we wouldn't have the vitality that we have in the business district. The electrical demand that we have is basically over a 5-year period, 4.6% increase. That is very minuscule on a year-by-year basis. And it kind of wonders why we're trying to have a solution such as Grayson, but I want to get to it on a different level, in terms of such a small increase when it's quite obvious that the city should have already been 5 years ago demanding that any new condominium have solar panels, any new residential construction have solar panels. There's a lot that should be going on, and GWP should be proactive to single-family residents like myself. When I found out the process, I gave up. I thought about it, and I just said, you know, this, to me, it's a disincentive. But I don't look at this rate growth legitimating this kind of monstrosity of a proposal. But I think, Mr. Kadijian, you brought up a very good point about what this is going to cost. The Federal Reserve is going to be increasing interest rates 0.25% 2 more times this year. We're going to be close to 4.5%, 4 3/4, and we really don't know what the international banking market and our system and our banks are going to be looking at. Because now we're saying, yes, Grayson, when it starts 5 years from now, you're absolutely correct. We might be looking at a very different financial picture. I like the idea that the city is saying a conservative, but I think there needs to be a much more realistic range, because we may end up, as a city, as ratepayers, paying a lot more than we're thinking about today. And if we're trying to correlate to today's rates or current rates, we have to remember we're coming out of a depressed real estate market, and interest rates are only starting to increase now, and it's more than likely they could be up 1.5% more in 3 or 4 years, which would have a definitive, and you're absolutely correct, impact on what we're actually going to be paying. 2 more points, because there'll be more discussion. I appreciate what the representative for the water system mentioned, that they're going to change the volume rate so that those people that are paying attention, that don't use water, are actually rewarded. I was kind of wondering about that, because my rates are always substantially lower than anybody else's in my neighborhood, which is okay. I mean, that's a personal choice. But there's no incentive, no reward, no rebate. I just do it. But I think if there's a sense that those people that actually use a substantially less amount of water on a weekly, monthly basis, that use substantially less electrical, yes, our bills should reflect that a little bit better, and I think it would enhance the long-term policy of the city for use of rates, because we do have to conserve. One final thing, I'm a city planner. I think a lot more has to be done by this department, this city, to bring people to meetings like this. We have enough money to go get outreach. There should be a substantial more representation of the public here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Next speaker is D. Molina.
Thank you. I'm distressed, upset, saddened by waste. We don't want money or water going down the drain. Maybe my question is off the wall, but here's a good place to ask it. How vulnerable is Glendale to broken water mains that flood streets and waste precious water? What is the monetary value of a I don't not just mean the engineers and the workmen have to go out there and repair the damage, but of the water that's lost. At a half a cent a gallon, I think, Los Angeles says that's what they charge for water. So maybe but it's precious, and water and clean air are scarce commodities, treasured resources. And thank you for trying to watch them for us.
Thank you.
Are are we subject to water main breaks in Glendale?
Defer to Mr.
Madam
Zerman.
President, members of the commission, that's in essence why we want to make sure we stay up on our infrastructure upkeep issues. But we do very well when it comes to...
So far, so good.
So far, so good, and I think over, especially the last 4 years, we've been pretty aggressive in going after as I said, the bread and butter, the core aspects of our system, pipes, valves, and that kind of thing. And I think we're in a lot better position than some. Certainly, LA found themselves in a very difficult position.
Hollywood is a Venice.
Yeah, you can see the ones that actually make the news are the really significant ones,
Right.
but they have quite a few on a regular basis, and we've been extremely fortunate. And I want to say we've been proactive enough to kind of steer our own fortune, and we haven't had that same experience.
How much money in water is lost in one of those things?
Boy, I don't know. That's a good question, but it's significant. I think if anybody was watching the news, unfortunately, Burbank had an incident over the weekend, and you don't know how much water it is, but just sitting there watching it for a short time on TV, it's pretty significant.
And you also had some a condition in there for the firemen to drop water, and that's water too that we have to pay for.
It is.
That's a lot.
But I think fire suppression, most people are pretty
yeah.
okay with whatever that
I
costs.
understand that. I understand that, but that's water we're not drinking. Oh. Thank you.
That's all the cards I have. Do you have any further cards?
I do not.
Okay.
Madam President, if I could add one statement, because one of the speakers mentioned that and maybe it was the way I presented it, that the in the water or the electric, the commercial was being subsidized by the residential, and that's not true. In fact, it's quite the opposite, which is why we are going through a 10-year process of equalizing the rates. Right now, the commercial is paying significantly more than the cost of service for those classes, both small, medium, and large, while the residential is not covering their full cost of service. So that isn't the case. It's actually quite the opposite.
And the interest rate on the bond is set from the day you get that bond.
That's correct.
So you're not affected by changes in interest rate.
It's not a variable rate. And in most cases, after a 10-year period, we start looking at refinancing. And in fact, we're looking right now at refinancing some of our water bonds and looking at a potential significant savings. So, yeah, that's a very good point, Mr. Kadiki.
Thank
you. If we are finished asking questions on this, I think we have reached the end of oral communications. Is there any further comments from the commissioners? Madam Clerk?
Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
5, oral communications.
No, we're done with that. So you don't have any cards, right?
No, I do not.
So agenda forecast.
If I may clarify, so that the comments that you received, were they comments under reports for the electric and water rates?
Yes, those were all specific to that.
Okay, and then for oral communications, we have no comment cards, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, Madam President, members of the commission, you see before you the budget forecast, budget on the brain, agenda forecast for the next several months. We have at our next meeting was going to be the budget presentation. And that would include a review of both water and electric. The PBC budget would be included in that, and we'd show you what our proposed capital budget requests are for the year.
And at that point, the
That's prior
water...
to council adoption.
This is prior to council
One
adoption.
day prior, but
Okay.
it's prior. Fifth, yes. Yes. The rates are May 22nd. That's where they come back. Actually, that's where the resolutions will be presented to the council.
So with regards to our purpose here as commission, I think our mandate is to provide recommendation. And we are getting these reports, and it's nice, but I hope we do our job and present some sort of a recommendation to City Council to consider or ignore. But at least our mandate is to provide a recommendation. And my objective is so that what had happened before, where you go 15, 20 years without any upgrades, doesn't happen. And hopefully another set of eyes gets to put on this and give a recommendation and pass it up, and they could decide what they want to do. So with that in mind, with the proposed rate increases, I would hope if we can set some sort of a meeting to pass on a recommendation to City Council to decide whatever they want to do.
And that's fine. I think unless Christine has, Ms. Cadenas has an objection, I can go back and start polling all of you for a good day. If that sounds reasonable. If there is consensus, Mr. Kadikian's made a suggestion.
Commissioners, your thoughts?
I agree.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm just telling you that you have been recommending all the time. What's your objection?
No, there is no objection from them. It's just in the
No, I
past.
mean, as far as you say, you had opportunity to do your recommendation, and you have done. As far
Yes,
as I see.
and this one too. I want to continue that process.
Yeah, continue.
Okay, so I'll put out a poll for all of you, check the times. And we're leaving it open, so it's not going to necessarily be on Monday. It could be any
Okay.
day that we
Right.
find that
Yeah.
you're available. Not Saturday or Sunday.
Not Saturdays. Okay, so presumably we will hold a meeting then prior to May 22nd, a special meeting of this commission.
That would be the idea.
Specifically to address the issue of rates.
Well, as a recommendation, we'll call it that. We've made the
recommendation.
presentation, and then it would be to answer any additional questions you may have. And we'll have, I suspect, a motion.
Correct. We can have a motion for water rates, a motion for electric rates.
Right. And by then the COSA would be out, and so we're all.
Well, hopefully,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
You're saying COSA is going to be out
Today.
I'm
Like
hoping
today,
it's
tomorrow.
out tomorrow morning, but we'll double check. I think the water is good. I think the electric gas had couple glitches we had to finish up.
Are there any further community meetings scheduled?
No, tomorrow will be the first blush presentation to the city council.
Okay. All right, so moving on to, we've got June, for July, the water conservation update, customer service update.
I wanted to double check on that. 7-2, is everybody okay with that? I don't know what your vacation plans might be, but if you know ahead of time, we can make an adjustment on that. Maybe put the meeting to a little bit later in the month if
I think
you
that
have
would be good.
plans.
I think that
Yeah,
would be.
I have a conflict on that.
It's kind of tight with the holiday. A lot of people will
Right.
take the full week, or at least the first part of the week off.
Yeah, I think
so-
if we pushed it out a week, that would be good.
Okay, we'll look at that. And then everything else is good there to, we get to the Labor Day holiday. And if you want to have a special meeting that month, or if you'd like to wait a couple months and see what the agendas are looking like, and maybe you want to take the month off, I don't know.
Okay. I think, given the recommendation that was made at the last commission meeting regarding an RFI for the Grayson project,
RFP.
we're just curious as to if there could be an update at some point.
Sure, I'll give that to you
on-
next month.
Yeah, great.
Give it
Where
to you
that,
next
where
month's
that
meeting.
is.
We know the RFP is out.
RFP is out.
Okay.
Won't be back in until it'll be the first week of August, so I can easily get it in the June meeting for
Okay,
you. Give
great.
you an update on that.
Excellent.
That went out through SCAPA?
No, it went out through us.
Okay.
Any other comments, commissioners?
Adjournment.
Madam Clerk?
Adjournment?
All right, second?
Second?
All right, we are adjourned.